So today we're talking about psychology as a science. So far you've read about how for something to be a science, it has to have three key features. First, science has to be based on observation. It's not enough to just sit around pontificating or theorizing. You have to actually go out into the world and find out how it works. Check your predictions against actual data, and sometimes allow those data to check you. So often science means coming up with an amazing hypothesis that you think will explain everything, and then you go and try to test it and it doesn't work. That's part of the scientific process. Second, science is concerned with testable research questions. There has to be some way to get at the objective truth, something natural and observable that is going to answer your question one way or another. So lots of interesting questions unfortunately can't be tested because there's no way to observe them or disconfirm them. Finally, your results have to be shared. If you make some interesting predictions and do some careful, rigorous observations, and then you just sort of leave those notes at home, in a notebook, or in a file on your computer, then you didn't do science because you didn't communicate your results. You have to publicly share your results somewhere so that they can actually contribute to the body of knowledge. That's the last third part of the scientific process. So that's what science is. What about what science isn't? And this all brings us to this topic of pseudoscience, stuff that people think might be science but actually isn't. So you just watched a video explaining how Freud, one of the grandfathers of modern psychology, was really more of a pseudoscientist than a real scientist. A more modern example of this would be ESP research. So the basic idea behind ESP, or extrasensory perception, is that some people are able to sense things with something other than their five senses, basically magic. So seeing things you haven't shown them, predicting the future, and so on. Now, the idea that ESP exists is not pseudoscience on its own. It is in fact a testable hypothesis. You can go get someone who claims to have ESP and then test whether their ability works. See if they can tell you what cards you're holding without them actually looking at them or whatever it is they claim to be able to do. And researchers have conducted studies like this many, many times. The problem is when people who don't believe in ESP, like me, test for ESP in the lab under controlled conditions, we don't find ESP. And at that point, ESP researchers usually explain the null findings away. They'll say, well, of course it doesn't work because you're not a true believer. You made me nervous and my powers disappeared. I can't work in these conditions. And then that's the line of thinking that turns the research area into pseudoscience. It's the persistent attempts to explain away contradictory evidence and not letting the hypothesis actually be falsified. Before the scientific method was widely used, medicine was a field that was full of pseudoscience. I think a really clear case, particularly of this falsifiability problem, can be found in the story of the yellow fever pandemic. So in the 1790s, a yellow fever epidemic hit Philadelphia, killing thousands of people. In fact, it wound up killing about 10% of the population because no one knew what this disease was or how to treat it. Now, the doctor Benjamin Rush, trained with ideas about humors and imbalances in the body, which were really popular in the 1700s, tried to treat patients with bloodletting, which we now know is not effective. But it took the medical community a really long time to realize that bloodletting didn't work because when the patient got better, the treatment had worked. And when the patient died, well, they were too far gone for the treatment to work. See, so there's no way to falsify the theory, and as a result, unfortunately, lots of people died. Okay, so based on all this, why is psychology considered to be a science? Well, because whether something's a science has a lot less to do with the content that you're looking at than the method you're looking at it with. It's not what you're looking at. Atoms, animals, weather patterns, human groups. all possibly studied scientifically because they're all observable and natural. What determines whether something is a science is how you're looking at it. Psychology is considered to be a science because, and insofar as, it adheres to the scientific method. We use empirical methods by observing people and collecting data. And then we use those data to answer testable, falsifiable research questions. And then when we have our results, we share them with the scientific community and ideally with the broader public, following those 3 key tenets of science and what makes something a science. That said, psychology is a particularly weird branch of science because the thing being studied, humans, is also the thing doing the studying, humans. And in this discipline, we're basically trying to study ourselves. And that brings up, I think, some unique issues. Like, can we ever be truly objective in our study of ourselves? Probably not. I would argue, actually, that no one is ever objective about their life's work. Every scientist in any discipline, in any field, tends to really want their own pet theory to be right. And that's why scientific rigor is all the more important. Selectively finding evidence for things because you want them to be true is a really dangerous trap for scientists. And arguably, it's a particularly dangerous trap when you're studying your own species and therefore have even more of a vested interest in maybe coming to a particular conclusion. And so, no matter how much we want our hypotheses to be true, we have to make sure that we give them every possible opportunity to fail. Another sort of contradictory question that comes up is, should we even bother studying psychology as a science? Isn't it all just common sense? Believe me, I wish it was. I really do wish that psychology was common sense. But take one look at all the bad pop psychology claims that are out there, and I think you'll see that it's not. Like the claim that people use only 10% of their own brain power. Super popular concept, doesn't make a lot of evolutionary sense, and we know it's completely bonkers false. The idea that people have different learning styles that can be matched to teaching styles. I'm an auditory learner, I'm a visual learner. We now know that that is bunk. It makes sense, it sounds intuitive. It's not true. The idea that hypnosis helps people remember forgotten events. Not a thing one can do, and we're going to get a little bit more into why that's been a really dangerous idea next semester. The truth is that there's nothing about human behavior that's common sense. Humans are really strange creatures, and we are ridiculously bad at gaining intuitive insight into our own behaviors. And that's what makes psychology so difficult, and that's why rigorous methods are absolutely essential, because they're what separate our science from pseudoscience. They're what allow us to sort out what is true from what is not.